Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician. I've got something interesting to discuss with you. I haven't posted in a while, but I am on vacation and I've had a chance to ponder a couple things actually in some long drives I've been taking, and this was just a couple of ideas I've been thinking about. This is not really a complete presentation by any stretch of the imagination, but it's some areas for you to consider as you maybe develop a seemingly impromptu carry around kind of suite of effects. Okay, this can be used to create a number of different effects that are seemingly impromptu and in the vein of mentalism. And as this video goes, we'll talk about my feelings on performing mentalism and how I approach it with people, and just the reasons why I approach it that way with the people that I do presentations for. So, a couple things. First of all, I was just spent the past week, performing some magic for young people. I was visiting my folks down in Pennsylvania, and I was helping them with their local church vacation Bible school. I was teaching the lesson, the Bible lesson, Bible story lesson, and I was using magic effects as illustrations. So, and you know the stuff that I do on the channel, I kind of bring the heat. I don't particularly enjoy children's magic as we know it, with color changing, coloring books, those kinds of things, the typical things you would see. I used effects that I know work really well for adults, not merely something that would work well for kids. And I like things that are very organic, that seem to use normal, ordinary objects rather than bringing in, sponge balls or proppy kinds of things. So I did effects to the, to that kind of, in that kind of style that you're used to on the channel. It went really great. Everything went well. I had to do every effect I did. I had to do it several times because I had rotating classes coming in. And I had to pick effects that I knew would land maybe subtly differently for each group, so that when they talk to each other later, I couldn't really depend on forces, because I didn't want them later on to be discussing with one another and realizing that everybody picked the same things, right? So I had to be very picky and choosy about what I did. Went really great. I got to the end of the week. We had a cookout closing program, a picnic kind of thing, and one of the kids came up to me with a friend and said, "Hey, why can't you show us something now?" And I did. I did. Actually, I ended up doing a colossal killer kind of effect, just as a trick. No illustration or anything, but just because they asked. And that was the last thing I did. And it went really well, not only for them, but the parents that were right there and could see it. But then it occurred to me that that's all I had on me, apart from doing something like a book test where I would need someone to go find a book, an impromptu kind of situation. I really didn't have anything else on my person. And it got me thinking about other possibilities for carry around. And that got me thinking about this. This is kind of a mentalism sort of routine, but more so, it got me thinking about what makes up a good mentalism routine that can seem very impromptu, even if it has some preparation to it. It's sort of a propless kind of thing. Now, you could use props, but you wouldn't necessarily have to. Meaning like something to write with and some paper for the spectator to use. And obviously there's some props on the revelation side of this that we'll get to in a moment. So that's the first thing that got me thinking. Now, the other thing that got me thinking was I don't want to talk politics on this channel. I don't have an interest in doing that. I have very strong feelings politically about things, but that's not what this is for. But because I like politics, and I mean, for me, elections are like the Super Bowl. I'll sit there and eat popcorn and watch election returns and be happy as any football fan on Super Bowl Sunday. So that's just me. So, I can tend to watch C-SPAN from time to time. And this, just over the weekend, I was watching just a short, maybe 30 minutes or so of some congressional hearings with a particular official, high-ranking government official. And it was brutal, and I'm listening to these elected officials, elected leaders ask these questions, and the big questions always come up. What did you know When did you know it, and what were your sources? These are the big questions that the person in the hot seat had to answer. It did not go well in this particular hearing at all. But these questions, as I was hearing them, it got me thinking, boy, isn't this really the crux of mentalism, right? What did you know? When did you know it? What were your sources? If you kind of answer these questions, what did you know? When did you know it? What were the sources of the information? You can really understand how a mentalist effect works, right? What did you know? Well, what are the, and this gets to the third one, what are the sources? Well, what did you know? What is the bank of information that's being pulled from? Is there some kind of limitation around it? What makes that limitation? Is it arbitrary? Is it selected? Does it seem selected? A lot of questions, a big rabbit hole. When did you know it? Boy, this is a big one too, because this has implications not only for the spectator, but more so for the performer. When did they know the information? When did the performer know the information? Are we dealing with a force in that the performer knew the information in advance of the effect, and everything is kind of programmed to funnel toward a pre-known determination, a predetermined kind of outcome? Or is the information more freely selected and it's depended more on acquiring information, likely through some kind of peak or some kind of situation or deduction? These are really, really important questions. And if you can answer these in a logical sequence, you can really formulate a killer mentalist effect. You just have to answer the questions and come up with the means to the end. So I got thinking about this, and here's something that you could really apply almost to anything as a mentalist sort of effect, a walk around, carry around kind of effect. Has some limitations in terms of it. Well, it could have some limitations. It depends on how you treat this. It could have fewer limitations than it needs to, but with that kind of a payoff of fewer limitations, there's also something you have to give up too. We'll get to that in a minute. Here's what I'm thinking. Picture the scenario, and you could do this right now. Let's say I want you. We need to come up with a famous person. Maybe a politician or maybe an actor or an actress, some kind of a movie star or a musician or something like that. So we're thinking in that, but it's got to be someone that I would know. It can't be extremely obscure. Otherwise, I can't know what I can't know. And this does not work perfectly. It's not a perfect outcome. I have to tell you that at the onset. There is an element of probability and chance related to this, which I really enjoy things in probability. I don't read minds. I'm not going to have you think of something and I'm going to read your mind. That's not what this is. I don't even believe in that. That's not something that I entertain. But just the improbability of what's going to happen, I think, should be sufficient to be amazing, okay? Or to amaze you. So let's imagine you got a bunch of really famous names sitting on a table here, like on this countertop. Maybe you've got some Hollywood movie stars and some musicians sitting on there. What would you like? Just imagine between those two. What would you like to remove from the table? The musicians or the movie stars? What do you want to remove? And let's say you say the movie stars. I say great. Okay, so we'll remove. We'll take the movie stars off the table, and you can see all these movie stars. You got ladies and you got men in there. You have actors and actresses. So among the actors and actresses, what would you like to pick out, the ladies or the men? Let's say you pick out the ladies. I say, great. So we'll pick out the ladies. At least you got the men here. And again, it needs to be someone who's contemporary. Do you have your phone on you? Why don't you take your phone out? Can you just quickly Google? Put in Google. Oh, I don't know. We need like current famous actors. I don't know, like last year's. Type in like 2023 Oscar nominees. Put that in. right? So you can do a search there. And you should see a list of names there. You're looking at, whoever the men are, best actor nominees. And I don't even know who they are. And even some of those names might be pretty obscure. But go ahead and look in the names that you have there. And I just want you, and take the time to do this right now as you're watching the video. So take a look at the list there. And I want you to just think of one. Focus on one, center on it. I'll give you a moment to do that. So you're thinking of an actor, a famous person. And it could have been anybody. I mean, this could have been a politician. It could have been an actor. It could have been a musician. It could have been a lady. It could have been, a man. It could have been really a wide breadth of famous people we're talking about here from different walks. But you've got one name in your mind. And I wrote something down earlier. And again, this isn't direct. It's not direct at all. But I think the improbability of this is sufficient enough. I have the initial CF. CF. Okay, so this may have worked for some of you because of the type of presentation I'm doing for video. Okay, now for those of you for whom this did not work, you would present this a little differently so that it would be a certainty. Okay, I'm assuming those of you for whom this worked, you're thinking of Colin Farrell. And what's happening here is we have a bank of names really from which you can think. You've got Brendan Fraser, Austin Butler, Colin Farrell, Bill Nighy, or Paul Mescal. And those are the names you could be thinking of. I just went with Colin Farrell, CF. Now, first of all, I want to say that I don't do mentalism as in mind reading. It's just not a way I like to work. For the number one reason, my circle of people simply don't subscribe to that. Okay, so to even entertain the concept of ESP kind of stuff, it's a non-starter. It's just a bunch of hoke, right? They're not going to go for that sort of thing. I can't even make that work. However, and I actually find even for people that do entertain that kind of stuff, improbability or probability kinds of effects are no weaker than mind reading, telepathy, mentalism kind of things, right? It's no weaker. It's as strong. So what I do is I prefer the thing that is as strong and covers a wider base of spectators in terms of style. That's just where I end up, okay? It's also indirect. I only do the initials. Because I'm going for improbability, this is sufficient. These initials only match one name of a bank that they're looking at from the potential of a much wider bank that they themselves eliminated. The chances that you end up with these particular initials are incredibly improbable given all of the possibilities. And this, because it's indirect, it's not a direct hit, it actually lends itself to increasing the the lack of believability of the improbability. If this was a direct hit, it sort of ventures into what we call the too perfect theory, that this was narrowed down specifically to get to this one thing, because it is so exact. The fact that it is not exact, but certainly exact enough, helps to shut the door on that particular element of the too perfect theory, right? That if I am indirect enough, it means that this could have been maybe a different name that had these letters, but there's no way to really track back that you could have come up with a bank of names, because of the bank they're looking at, only one name matches this, okay? So just follow with me how, in one sense, we're increasing our availability of hits because we're indirect, but in another sense, we're actually shutting doors because we're indirect. And I like to think about shutting doors in this way, particularly with mentalism, and particularly when dealing with the two perfect theory. So very quickly, if you've never heard of this, which I think if you're watching this channel, you know what this theory is. The two perfect theory and the magical effect is a theory that suggests that the outcome, the revelation of the effect directly points to the method because the revelation is too perfect, meaning that it could only come out this way and there's only one method that could point to that outcome. Therefore, the method is apparent because of the revelation. Some people say, well, the best way to deal with the two perfect theory, if they even subscribe to that, and I do subscribe to that, the best way to do is to actually open doors and say, well, there's multiple ways I could have gotten to this. The people who disagree with that say, well, why would you want to open a bunch of doors and then say, well, there could be a bunch of possible methods, and now they just can't figure out which method it is. That doesn't make the effect stronger. This, what I'm talking about, doesn't do that. In one potential, it does open up the doors, but the improbability remains because the combination of names is too vast for this really to be so indirect that it improves my chances, right? By doing this, by making it indirect, I actually shut a door. I shut a door on the idea that I was exact, but I leave available the improbability that I could possibly come up with this combination of letters that would match a name that they are thinking of from a potentially endless bank of names, right? If you can follow that, you see what I'm getting at. You want to think very carefully about how you deal with the two perfect problem, okay? I prefer indirectness. I prefer probability-based effects. I think they're just as strong as purporting to read someone's mind. So anyway, that's just where I'm at, okay? And that's why I would pick this. You could be direct. You could say that you're reading someone's mind. Now, the problem with reading someone's mind and then producing a piece of paper, if you were really reading someone's mind, you would say what they're thinking. Now, there's ways to get to that. I'll talk about in a minute. You could just eliminate this paper thing and you could name what they're thinking, but you have to have additional layers of method. I guess I'll deal with that right now, right? You could peek that they wrote down, but then that makes it weaker because they're writing something down. Now, a lot of mentalism works on that, but you could have them write it down and turn it over or something like that, or you could have a way, put it into a peek wallet. Now you're carrying more apparatus. But, I think having them write it down makes it weaker. You could pump for information. All these names are different. You could pump for some kind of information. You could use, in your pumping, you could use a progressive anagram. That could be a way to do this. And those of you that do mentalism, you know how those tools work. Because you have a finite bank of names, and I'll talk about how I get there in a minute. You could do that. Those are possible ways. But this, I think, is strong enough. Now, how would I do this in real life? Rather than just taking a chance that I get it right. What I would do is I would have them write the name down. And I would probably do it like this. I'd say, go ahead and write down the name that you're thinking of. Go ahead and write it down. And I would look away like this. I'd say, and I would give them instructions. I'd say, just go ahead and write your name right there on that pad, right here on the table. I might even be specific enough to say, here's a sticky note, and I might stick it to the table. And I would say, go ahead and write a name right on that sticky note, and then set the pen down on the table. So I'm giving very specific instructions that don't tell them to turn it over or take it away. Okay? If they do turn it over and they do take it away, then I'm no worse off. I can just say, what was the name that you wrote down? Let's see it. And then I make my match, right? But I have a layer. I have an opportunistic layer here. If they write it down and it's sitting face up because I didn't tell them otherwise, I can glance down and say, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and turn that over so I don't see it. And in that moment, I actually caught a glimpse. And now I'm ready for a very direct revelation without having them reveal it to me. It's a simple, stupid way to get a glimpse, but that's a good one, okay? I just don't give them complete instruction. They write it down. I look over, I get the glimpse, because my bank is so small of only about 5 names, I can immediately identify what it is. And I say, oh, wait, I'm sorry, I don't want to see it. Can you turn it over? And now I remove myself from liability by suggesting that I haven't seen it when in fact I had, and then I can reveal this. And it's irrelevant if I have seen it because this is impossible anyway, right? This is working off of several principles. Obviously, I have a bank. I have multiple outs. I've got a Post-it note for every name on the list in pocket index, body index locations. Simple as that, okay? CF is in my back pocket, but then I've got AB for Austin Butler, because these are the names. The names are Austin Butler, Brendan Fraser, Bill Nighy, Colin Farrell, and Paul Mescal. So I've got one here, one in another pocket over here, one in the back pocket, and then one in the back pocket over here in alphabetical order. Simple as that. Okay, I've got a Post-it note with initials for each one of those names. How do I get to 2023 Oscar Best Actor Oscar nominees, men? How do I get there? Well, it's simple. I have a tiered layer of elimination, and this is addressing my questions. What did you know? When did you know it? And who were your sources? We'll get to sources at the very end. The source is going to be this list of 5 people. That specific. What I need to do is I need to get the spectator to innocently eliminate to that list from seemingly open possibilities. Okay? First, I start, in my multi-tiered approach, I start with some arbitrary limitation, arbitrary justification, something I talk about in a couple of the books I've written about any card at any number. So in this case, the first thing I say is we need to think of a contemporary famous person, someone like a politician, or a movie star, or a musician or something like that. I just named 3 categories, but I'm just going to eliminate one. I'm going to remove politician. Now I said it, but I said it only once, and then I say, imagine on the table, on the countertop here, we've got just a list of famous people, movie stars and musicians. So I've arbitrarily just eliminated politicians, but I'm going to bring that up later on, that it could have been that. Okay, so this is a little detail. It's a throwaway detail that I can always return to, just to remind them that the bank of names was extremely vast, and they're the ones that narrowed it down. Okay, so arbitrary limitation. Now, what I'm dealing with is movie stars and musicians. This is simple equivoque. Simple equivoque. First, I say, what would you like to remove from the table? Would you like to remove the movie stars or the musicians? Right? They say musicians. I say, great, let's take away the musicians. And I might have even messed this up on the video. I can't remember. I think I said one thing and did another, but it doesn't matter. I want the movie stars because I'm trying to get to that list of 5 names. And I want them to get to the list using their phone, using Google. I'm not even going to be the one to do it. We can even use technology to help us. And it's their technology. So therefore, all of the sources, what were your sources? For me, I want my source to be this list of people. For them, I want them to think about their sources being their access to information, their own mind, their own phone, their own searching, their own research. Okay. So I'm left with Hollywood stars one way or the other. If they say remove the movie stars, I say great. So you've got a list of movie stars. You got ladies and men, actors and actresses on there. Would you like to pick out the actors or the actresses? Or I say, all right, we remove the musicians. You've got actors and actresses left on the table here. Would you like to pick out the actors or actresses? Either way, I say pick out. Now, this can follow in suit to remove, or it can be a point of focus. Again, it's just my favorite means to use equivoque because you're geographically changing the location of things rather than having them pick and select. So they pick out the ladies. I say, great. Let's pick out the ladies, and now we've got some actors that we're looking at. And I might not even say that. I might just go directly to, this is a kind of a philosophy I have about it. Rather than naming what is left whenever they've eliminated, just go to the next direction and let that be self-evident. So the next direction would be, do you have a phone on you? You got your phone on you? Go ahead and look up actors. I don't know, some people we know, someone I would know contemporary. So like, I don't know, last year's Academy Award nominees. Can you look that up real quick? So 2023 Academy Award actor nominee. And they do that and they'll get a list from the Google return, and it should be finite. It should be limited to this list of people. Okay. And then I have my bank and I've got my outs. So that's the equivocate to get down to that. And that's my strategy for doing it. And then again, I have an indirect revelation. So anyway, this can work with anything. I mean, this could work with anything. All you need is to have classifications that you can narrow using a tiered approach to getting down to a multiple out. Multiple outs are the strongest. It's one of the strongest methods in mentalism, is having multiple outs. I think a singular force, while that can be very strong, particularly when doing card magic or something like that, where you have a logical bank, there's 52 identities and they're real and material and they're right there. You pick a card. I'm always dealing with that finite thing. But when you're dealing with, identities, finite number of identities, 52 to be specific. But when I'm dealing with mentalism and information that is just out there, it could be any piece of information, I need to create classifications. I need to create boundaries from which the information flows. Famous people, that's the first boundary. Politicians, musicians, movie stars, that's the second boundary. Third boundary, arbitrary justification or limitation. I throw out politicians and I only name the ones I want to focus on. Movie stars and musicians, right? I might even get in there, people that are, have Grammy nominees, Oscar nominees, these are the kind. So now by saying that ahead of time, as we're talking about names on a table or countertop, figuratively, now I've already introduced my end game. Right, because I talked about award season kind of names. Then we get them to identify Hollywood movie stars. Then we get them to identify the men or the women. You could do the list either way, right? And then from that, I do have a very finite amount that I've already justified by saying, award nominees. And then I can have them use their own technology, use Google in their own way. There's nothing fishy about this. It's not, look on my phone, I see that I have this list of names. Or here's a list of names of the Oscar nominees. Go ahead and think of one. I'm not introducing information. They're the one doing the research, and they're potentially doing research on something that I haven't even thought about ahead of time. And I can guarantee it because I only wrote down initials. I'm not even thinking of a name. I was only thinking of these initials. I wasn't even thinking of Colin Farrell. This is just what came to me earlier in terms of maybe a probability or a chance opportunity to identify what you are thinking of. Okay, so this is my strategy for it. You can apply it to anything. You just have to create your classifications. And this could be a carry around kind of idea. You could have multiple lists. I could extend this. I could have a list of 10 multiple outs and do ladies and men. And then I can create a shell of truth, which is something I talk about on the channel and in my writings about equivocate. Rather than eliminate ladies or men using equivocate, I could say, what do you like, the actors or the actresses? Do you like the lady actors or the men actors? You pick. Which one do you want to do? And the truth is I've got 10 outs, which is not unheard of. That's not outrageous. I could do 10 outs with a pocket index or even with a wallet index or something like that. That would be very easy to do. And then I have them look up Oscar nominees from last year, and they get a list of 10 people, and they have a name. Okay. And I've created a shell of truth because they made a truth choice. There was only one layer of equivocation, only one. So when there's only one layer of equivocation, it's impossible to trace. You cannot trace equivocation unless you have more than one layer of it. If there's only one layer of equivocation, you can't know based on comparison how that choice was steered. You can't. You need to have inconsistency. And 50% of the time, when you have two layers of equivoque, you still can't trace it because the two choices are congruent to each other. Either both were selection or both were elimination of some kind. So you got to think about these things. If you can get one layer of equivocation and have a wider bank of multiple outs, that's a lot stronger. But anyway, I think this is very strong for mentalism as kind of what seems to be an impromptu sort of demonstration of a choice. And it really does feel like it comes from open-ended choice. I could have thought of anything. They could have thought of anything. The narrowing of names is fairly invisible, I think, in a procedure like this. And it seems very benign. And again, I think it's very strong to go with probability outcomes, and I think it's very strong to go with indirect revelations. Trust me, this is as powerful. I believe that this is more powerful than if this had said Colin Farrell on it. I think it's more powerful to have the indirect revelation than to do it that way. And this brings up all kinds of other possibilities too. I could do this very cleanly. I could go, well, it's interesting, I have this, and pull it out immediately. But I also could have done this with a nail writer, and it really could have been an open, completely open choice. I need them to name it, or I need them to write it down, and I need to get a peek. But when it's really an open choice, my peek has to be more direct because I really do need to know the name. Whereas in this case, if I get a peek from them writing in the open, all I need to do is get a very quick glance to identify from a very small bank of names what it is. So again, one method influences how well another method works in cooperation. These are things you have to think about. I could do this with a nail writer. I could do it with pocket writing. The revelation would have to be a little bit nuanced, though, from being extremely direct in this way. Think about these things. You want to think about these things. I could have one setup that works in this way with a list and narrowing, but I could also have a nail writer on me, and I could do the exact same effect, right, immediately after with a completely open choice. I could say, look, I wrote this down earlier, but here I'm thinking of a number, any three-digit number. Name any three-digit number. Let me write something down here, and then I nail write from a post-it notepad the number they're thinking of. Now I've got a sequence of a couple of different mentalist effects that are the exact same effect, but I've done them back to back using very different methodology. And the openness of one chance in 1,000, influences the actual methodology for the prior. It seems open. I'm compelling them to think that the choice of an actor or actress or a famous person name is open, but in reality, the methodology made it narrow. But by doing another effect with a different method from something that is truly open immediately after that, it now influences the way they think about the possibility of methods for the first effect. Okay, so these are things you want to think about. Tiering methods, tiering, a progression of effects, how a tiered level of methods influences the way the prior method in the sequence can be used, and the way in which the later method in the sequence will be viewed in light of the previous method. This is very complex, and you really want to go through the trouble of thinking about all of it. Anyway, those are some thoughts on mine. What did you know? When did you know it? What were your sources? Answer these questions, and you can create powerful, powerful mentalism. Not only answering these questions for the spectator, but more so answering them from your perspective. What did you know? When did you know it? And what were your sources? If you can identify that, you got a good, strong effect. And again, this could be simple. What did you know? I knew one thing. When did you know it? I knew it way at the beginning. What were your sources? It was a a very finite choice that seemed open to them but was forced. I have a force. That's the answer for a force. One thing, knew ahead of time, made them pick it. That's a force. Okay? If it gets more complicated than that, then you have something like that. And both can look equally strong as long as you play out all the considerations that we're discussing here. Anyway, a lot of random thoughts there, some things for you to think about. Best of luck with this. Happy magicking.